A new report indicates that although Africa may have been spared the worst of the COVID-19 death tolls, the continent does face recession, growing violence, and higher unemployment rates due to the pandemic. The 2021 Ibrahim Forum Report shows that the global economic shutdown has driven Africa into recession for the first time in 30 years. Conflict resolution and counterinsurgency efforts, according to the report, were scaled back, opening doors for extremist groups to capitalize on the pandemic. The report was released ahead of the annual conference of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, which promotes good governance in Africa. For more on this, we're now joined by Jay Naidoo, a board member at the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. He joins us via Zoom from Johannesburg. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Naidoo. The report, of course, echoes what has been discussed before about the impact of COVID-19 on livelihoods across Africa. However, the particular focus seems to be on a recession and on violence. Tell us more about the report's key findings.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show. And yes, I think there has been, from our research, a coordinated approach by leadership. But the whole pandemic and the length it's taken has also exposed severe problems and weaknesses related to the structural resilience of our healthcare systems, the economic model that we are pursuing that has been, exposed in terms of economic growth. And so, yes, although we have only 3% of reported cases, and we account for 18% of the world's population. So certainly at the economic level, we begin to see that the absence, say, of an industrial base, the fact that we are commodity producing economies that are very susceptible to the global economy and what's happening there has demonstrated that. And our absence of a strong industrial base has been explicitly revealed in the way in which we see vaccine manufacture and distribution, to an extent where we're almost witnessing a type of vaccine apartheid, where the majority of doses of the vaccine have been bought up by developed countries far ahead of their production. And so, yes, this does display certain weaknesses that require us as Africa to think about what the African agenda would be in the recovery period, and what is the economy we want to see in Africa.
And of course, according to the report, Jay, Africa was the only continent where incidents of violence rose over the course of the pandemic. What do you attribute this to?
Well, I think the response by some of our governments have been pretty authoritarian. So what we're starting to see from the data is the closing of civic space, the ability of people to participate in voicing their opinions, the way in which they can input into the new policies that are rising. And I think in the context that governments have been facing, many governments have chosen the iron fist approach rather than engagement approach and finding a social consensus. Because let's acknowledge the fact that in a continent which is facing huge endemic poverty, hunger, the fact that a lot of our work in the economy is informal or agricultural linked, we have to acknowledge that closing down that has affected people's ability to just survive. And so there are consequences that require us to look more deeply at the type of integration we need in Africa, the economic integration, the way in which we strengthen the healthcare systems across the board, and make sure that we don't avoid, again, in our focus on COVID, that we're ignoring other major challenges that we've had in health delivery in the continent, which is HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, etc. So ultimately, it requires an integrated approach in which we rely on our own resources. We build up our own capacity and skills to manage not just this pandemic, but future pandemics that we definitely know will come.
Indeed. And when you talk about the Africa that we want to see in the future, what is the key element when it comes to a recovery strategy for the continent?
Well, I think in particular, we have to see that the involvement of young people, because demographically, 60% of the 1.3 billion Africans in our continent are now under 25, and that is increasing. We want to see the involvement of women, particularly because 90% of our food is produced by women in Africa. And we want to see a strategy that harnesses our resources and assets, which includes people, but also includes tremendous assets that fuel the global economy. And if we are smart about this, we can move from being the epicenter of hunger to being the breadbasket of the world. We can address energy, the access to clean energy, which deprives close to 700 million people the right to clean energy. We can look at a strategy that harnesses clean energy and harnesses the resources that are available to pursue a different growth model so that we're not just exporting our wealth, our commodities. And so we build resilience in the way we have an African economy going into the future.
Well, clearly the solutions are there. Let's hope the political will follow. Thank you so much, Jay Naidoo, joining us via Zoom from Johannesburg.